Manners from Heaven by Quentin Crisp, Chapter 1, Rude Awakenings. Opening quote for the chapter. The development from egoism to consideration for others is the foundation of all good manners. Harold Nicholson, Good Behaviour. I confess, for most of my 75 years on this cosmic dust ball, I have been guilty of bad manners. I was ostentatious in appearance, enough to stop traffic on some occasions and interrupt conversations on others. At one time, if you had looked down on streets in the city of London from a high window, you would have seen only people dressed in black, brown, dark blue, or dark gray. Even women did not wear scarlet coats in the street. If you then spotted a blazing technicolor rash moving slowly through this austere parade, it would either have been a fruit cart or myself. Good manners require that we tailor our appearance and behavior to suit a particular person or occasion. But in my flamboyant prime, I would have none of that. I would have dressed the same to meet the Queen at Buckingham Palace. Wisely I was never invited, as I did to meet the Queens in a King's Road cafe. I never adjusted my wicked, wanton self. In an era where many thinking people were reds, I was outspokenly rouge. When a young man with bright henna hair and a silky spangled shirt waltzes into a room today like a vamp of the silent screen, his every gesture a neon scream of effeminacy, what gaudy ghosts I see in the rearview mirror of my own life. But he is either atrociously ill-mannered or else a rock star, or both. Good manners would demand that on no account, even by implication, should I bring to light a subject offensive to other people, by going about with my eyelashes blacked, eyebrows plucked, and hair obviously dyed. I was dragging into people's consciousness and conversation some sexual reference to myself, about which I would have kept quiet if I had been well-mannered. Most people who take up an attitude expressing an individuality that is far removed from the characteristics of the majority pass from the statement, "I am different," to defiance and proud of it, and then, having gone too far, must move back to the middle. I no longer cast about for weirder, wilder things to say or wear. I will be the same now, more or less, forever. Most people I meet say, "I wouldn't call you eccentric now." Well, hardly. So I know that I have moved towards the world, and the world has moved towards me. We've met at last, in a compromising position. At one time this was not so. In my Edwardian youth and Georgian middle age, the world, I mean Britain, stayed exactly where it was, aggressively conformist and conservative. I stayed exactly where I was, a blithe spirit reveling in androgynous anarchy, and there was a battle. When I was young, before I realized that if I have any talent at all, it is not for doing, but for being, I dwelt in the shadows of opprobrium. I was so disfigured by the characteristics of a certain kind of homosexual person that, when I grew up, I realized that I could not ignore my predicament. I was from birth an object of mild ridicule because of my movements, especially the perpetual flutter of my hands, and my voice, which as recently as 1982 was described by a kind critic from the Village Voice, reviewing my non-performance in an off-Broadway production of Eric Bentley's Lord Alfred's Lover, as that of a nasal Mr. Magoo. I was extremely plain as a child, physically very weak, timid, dreamy, sickly, the youngest, all the things for which one will never be praised. To make matters worse, my deformative years occurred at a time when individuality was not prized, and thus everything one did was criticized if it was unlike the behavior of other people. Sometimes, with my parents, this criticism was rooted in a genuine anxiety over my future. They would think, well, he's never going to get a job wearing a pink shirt. We must explain this to him. Then, when I went on wearing a pink shirt, a family row would break out. None of this was willful perversity on my part. Even if I had adopted the British uniform of masculinity, stoic face, stiff upper lip, obsequiously drab clothes, with the fear of God tailored into them, I would have been no better equipped to deal with the world. There was never any hope that I could pass as a real person. As with the character Alban in the film La Cage aux Folles, disguises of normality only made me look unconvincing. Rather than suffer the humiliation of being unmasked as a homosexual and the subject of vicious gossip, rather than be accused of creating a false impression of normality, it seemed to me preferable to be clearly identifiable as someone stranded between the sexes, an obvious pansy. This gave people sufficient warning and time to make up their minds as to what to do: call the police, lock up the kids, scream with laughter, or duck, perhaps even to become sociable. I became not merely a self-confessed homosexual, but a self-evident one. I put my case not only before the people who knew me, but also before strangers. I became my own cause célèbre. As I wrote once in The Naked Civil Servant, quote, "As soon as I put my uniform on, the rest of my life solidified around me like a plaster cast. From that moment on, my friends were anyone who could put up with a disgrace. My occupation, any job from which I was not given the sack. My playground, any cafe or restaurant from which I was not barred, or any street from which the police did not move me on. These crippling disadvantages gave my life an interest it would otherwise never have had. To survive at all was an adventure. To reach old age was a miracle. In one respect, it was a blessing. In an expanding universe, time is on the side of the outcast. Those who once inhabited the suburbs of human contempt find that without changing their address, they eventually live in the metropolis. In my case, this took a very long time." End quote. 50 years ago, when many more people than today believed that effeminacy was synonymous with homosexuality, I mistakenly presumed that I represented homosexuality by being effeminate. Now I know that I represented nothing grander than my puny self. In recent years, as I have made many more friends among heterosexuals and been subject to attacks by gay people, this awareness that I am first and last an individual, not a spokesman for any group, has been made all the more clear to me. Outsiders have difficulty expressing their identities while giving as little offense as possible. I tried personally to explain to the world that I could not help myself, that I was the victim of forces beyond my control. I certainly didn't arrive at my benighted position in life by staying awake at nights casting about for deliberate ways to annoy my parents and shock the neighbors. The difference in public attitudes towards homosexuality in the 1930s and the 1980s, I am speaking of Britain and the United States, not South Africa or Iran, is that, nowadays, people generally take offense only to things that are genuinely offensive, such as terrorists. In earlier times, people took offense to just about everything that fell outside their narrow and rigid tolerances. Today, most people seem to realize that who sleeps with whom is just about the least of society's problems. I have always needed the world, though at one time I was prepared to do without it. This is a well-known posture for young people. You scorn the world before it has a chance to scorn you. My entire manner was so grotesquely grand that I should think it was annoying in itself. If someone had said, "If you go on like this, you'll never have any friends," I would have replied haughtily and breathlessly, "I don't care. If they don't like me as I am, they can do without me." But it isn't true. As I have remarked on many occasions, people are my only pastime. I practice no hermetic art or self-centered occupation. I am someone who needs some way of making my peace with the world more than others. I don't think, well, I'll just go home and build a galleon inside a bottle. That'll consume several antisocial years. Or interface with my home computer. Exhibitionism is a drug, and I was hooked on it. I needed a daily fix of public consternation. I had this notion that as homosexuality was then regarded as something between a crippling disease and a poisonous fungus, smaller in its scope than socialism, but twice as deadly, especially to small children, it was my calling to go about and demonstrate how nice a homosexual could be, kind, considerate, patient, understanding and courteous to a degree unseen in most countries outside the Orient. In short, my first impulse, as a hot-blooded youth, was to rebel. And lo, I became a peacock without a cause. Eventually I realized that if I didn't want to alienate everyone by becoming more rude and shrill about my sins with every passing year, with the cause of inversion being to me what the PLO is to Vanessa Redgrave, I would have to develop a post-rebel phase to win friends and influence pulpits. It was then that I formulated Crisp's first law. If you feel that you cannot comply with the morality of the world, you must do everything else you can to be agreeable. If you want to know a number of people on terms which are at least an armed truce, you have to find some way of conducting your life so that people do not attack you. If you do not want the praise, the assistance, or acceptance of the world, then of course you can behave appallingly all the time, and your separation from society will be mutually welcomed. People will say, "Oh, I can't put up with him, he behaves so badly." And you are saying, "I don't intend to behave well, I don't need other people." It's only when you realize that you do need the world, and like me, you're on the outside looking in, that you think there must be some way in without abandoning yourself. This is what manners are, a way of getting what you want, without appearing to be an absolute swine, or at least a way of getting something of what you want, without giving total offense to other people. When the very center of your being, in my case, my ambiguous gender, becomes a subject of scorn, there isn't much choice about how to respond to the world. Either you say, "I'm awfully sorry, I see how wrong it is, I will not be homosexual from now onward." Or else you have to say, "I cannot be otherwise, this is the way I am. If you can't bear it, then we must never meet again." Eventually I reasoned that even if my appearance was startling to people, everything else about me must run the other way, to minimize my breach of manners. But this much of my life at least must be lived on my own terms. If you are a drunkard, you have to be very, very nice to people, so that they are willing to see you even though they know that by the end of the evening you'll be on the floor. You've got to make yourself likable enough to join the world in spite of your vice. Thus my interest in manners was born. Many people, when they are young, behave badly in the eyes of their elders, but they are really only being thoughtless. I was guilty of that all the time. I was so full of hysterical energy that I was always interrupting people. I didn't actually think, oh, what rubbish they're talking, I'm sure they'd rather listen to me. I just couldn't help myself. Now I've learned not to do this because I am totally calm and can adapt myself to any social situation much more easily. I'm not bursting to make jokes which could give offense. It's very difficult for young people not to show off, although I have known a few whose pulse was so slow that they had a reputation for being well behaved. If I am qualified to speak of manners, it is because I am now an old man. The turmoil inside me has subsided, and I can consider other people's feelings with equanimity. Less than half of the remedy for bad manners consists of learning ritual. The major part consists of bringing one's self to a state of calm, whereby one needs less, and isn't snatching at things, or so anxious to get somewhere that one pushes other people out of the way. I feigned calm long before I actually felt it. In time, the feigning of calm produced calm, and calm encouraged the development of the ability to consider other people's point of view. The Naked Civil Servant describes the rude but necessary actions of a raw youth who felt compelled to fling down a gauntlet in the face of the world and challenge society to a duel. This book describes what I have learned since, the more important lesson of how to get along with the world and avoid dichotomies where there need be none. Dressing as I did not make me happy necessarily, but it unified me. And that is what we must all do with our lives. There are always penalties up to any age for presenting the world with a highly individualized image. But if it is the genuine you and not some affectation, a distinction which I realize may take years to sort out, then you must be what you are, honestly and bravely, with all the taste and intelligence you can muster. Life will be more difficult if you try to fulfill yourself, but avoiding this difficulty renders life meaningless. To arrive at the end of your life thinking, I never did anything I really wanted to do, must be one of the most profound miseries the human soul is capable of feeling, and one for which there is no last-minute cure or consolation. I have been permitted to live so long that my life has become rewarding, but that is not the reason why I made my earlier decisions. Suffering low wages, I have never earned more than £12 a week during my so-called prime years, and chronic poverty, for I had no way of knowing that instead of retirement and senescence upon reaching 60, I would have a personal renaissance. In New York, where I have lived now for nearly 4 years, I am invited several times every week to luncheons, dinners, and other social engagements with people far more famous and more powerful, wealthy and wise. I have no idea what they see in me, but I am grateful for their affection and hospitality. My life has become an MGM musical, full of singing, dancing, and love. If an unregenerate degenerate, such as myself, can reach the highest echelons of American society through the art of manners alone, and there is nothing else in my favor, then perhaps my observations on how to get the most out of every social transaction for all concerned will be instructive. If there is hope for me, then surely there is hope for everyone.